Okay, that took a few extra seconds. Still learning StreamYard. Gotta love it. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Margaret Pinard. I'm a historical fiction and fantasy author, and it's time for another wrap-up. So I don't do Wednesday videos every Wednesday, but every couple weeks, I'm still doing wrap-ups so that the book haul of reviews doesn't get too big. So that's me. I do book content and author content. I read a lot and love to share the reviews. So the book reading haul is going to reflect some author to be stuff, but it should be good for people who are looking for good books as well, because several of these books I would recommend. So I've got 7. And how are we going to go through them? We're going to go through them chronologically. Yes, okay. And there's going to be lots of caveats. So buckle up, buttercups. I am going to pop into the chat an author to be thing, which is the link to follow me on Patreon. It is not necessary to pay. You can just follow me for free. And the next thing that I'll be revealing is the cover reveal. So I'm going to put a couple posts up before on Instagram to hopefully draw people in, and then exclusive first peek to the people on Patreon. So hopefully that gets some interest. I'm going to say hello to the chat. JC was here early. Catpaw was here saying good day, saying maybe I feel like I'm in Australia instead of Mexico today. Anita is here. Hello, hello. I did stick that tag back in. I hope none of the authors that I've read take offense at it. It's just cute because I read a lot of obscure books, and I'm going to be sharing one that I'm currently reading with you at the end that's quite obscure. So yes. Snapping my seatbelt. Good advice. Good advice. Okay, so I've got 7 books, as I said. Chronologically, the first one is The Indian Card. So this I am, see, I forgot to do this. Welcome, banner. Subscribe, please, if you're here and you love books. And we love Libro.fm because they give us advanced listening copies. So, The Indian Card by Carrie Lowry Schuett-Peltz. This is a phenomenal book. It's a memoir that has a lot of nonfiction in it. It is a great pick for Indigathon if you're going to be reading Indigenous authored books for November as part of a readathon. And otherwise, it's just very interesting revelations of American history. So Carrie Lowry Schuett-Peltz is someone who has worked for HUD for a long time and is a native enrolled with a tribe and has an interesting history to share of her relationship with her tribe, as well as what started her on the journey for this book, which is what makes an Indian Indian. And so I'm using invisible quotes with my fingers for that, because as a non-native person, I don't want you to think I'm using the term Indian in a derogatory way. She is using it to describe many things in this book because it's the historical term, and so I'm following her lead. So I'm also going to be talking much more about this book with Amy from A Star Reads. So I got this book early, as I said, from Libro, and she had to wait until it came out this month. So she's reading it now, and I'm messaging with her. And I really hope we are able to have an online discussion and invite people in to discuss the book with us, because there's a lot of really important things discussed in terms of politics, in terms of greed, in terms of the Supreme Court, and it's sort of overlaid and meshed with several other things I'm consuming, both in written and in podcast form right now. And so my brain is really buzzing with Native American cases and rights and issues and arguments, and it's really great. I feel like I'm learning a lot. So if you're interested in those issues, or you don't know anything about them, I would still say this is a great book to pick up. It's a memoir, so she takes you in from her viewpoint, and she's also a very accessible She doesn't read it herself. It is an audiobook narrator separate, but she gives you a lot of accessible humor and like funny sort of asides. There's even a shot at the beginning for those of you who love spreadsheets. So that's all I will say for the moment. I really recommend this. And, if you want to be up on the latest about own voices, about social justice and rights in America, I definitely recommend the Indian card, and stay tuned for Amy and my discussion of it together. Hopefully, if she has time. Okay. The details I've got saved, but I will not go over because I'm going to save that for the in-depth discussion with Amy. The next one I have is one I have in hand, which is this, A Tangled Mercy by Joy Jordan Lake. And if you missed that name, or if you don't remember that name, let me provide you with a playlist link. So Joy Jordan Lake was one of the authors who came on to talk about her work on the Good Fight Fridays. And I know for people like Jim, it's a little late. It's late in the day on a Friday here in the US. So it's a little late for Jim to attend live. Hi, Jim. But for people in America, about which this novel makes some comments, shall we say, it's a great video. So do watch the replay. Joy Jordan Lake came on and talked about this book, as well as Under a Gilded Moon, and her newest book, which is called Echoes of Us. So this is the one that I read the week before I interviewed her on the channel, and I was very glad I did. I'm a Gilded Age girl. Like, I do like learning about 1890s, 1900s, progressive era, like the terrible inequality and the way that Teddy Roosevelt sort of clapped back at the people who were getting way too rich, because it gives me hope for today. But this book is about the 1830s rebellion in South Carolina that didn't happen because it was stopped. It's a dual timeline historical fiction, or if you want to call it women's fiction. The main character in the modern timeline is a woman who is going back to the place she grew up and finding out about her history and trying to move on with her life once her mom dies. The historical timeline is the same place in the 1830s, and it has to do with a certain family and the slaves that they own and the rebellion that is brewing, and how some people were motivated by different things, and then their understandings changed, and how that relates to the modern storyline was just very well done. So my thoughts on this, looking at the review that I did. So yeah, one of the corners that I turned down on the top was when the main character gets to the town and she's tootling around. She meets up with this boy on the, not levee, but the seawall, I guess is what it's called, or something like that. And he's sort of a curious character, and they hit it off, and she becomes his friend and makes a friend in town when she's sort of lost. And she's talking with him and his dad, and she mentions the name of someone she's trying to get in touch with to find out about her family. And the kid goes off saying, "Oh yeah, we know the Pinckneys." And then the father says, "No, that's a different Pinckney. Those are white Pinckneys." And he said, "Oh, I didn't know there was a white kind." And, it's a funny thing for a kid to say, but then when you think about it, you're like, oh, that really reveals worlds about the whole system in that one statement. So Joy is very good at doing that sort of thing. She's delved into the Low Country speak. She's delved into historical details. I loved it. I loved it. There's also horrific stuff in here because it's during the time of slavery. There's violence. There's graphic violence. So beware of that. If you don't want to see that, don't read it before bed kind of thing. But I thought she did a really, really nice job of weaving in sort of like healing threads and people trying to mend after such a rent in the fabric of society. So Yeah, really recommend. And then the other piece that I was going to say, oh, there's also some romance in here. And the other corner that I turned down was like a really cute moment that made me giggle a lot in it's not a meet cute because they already met, but like it's something later when you're like, oh, okay, they actually like each other. And it was just really cute. So she's very good at doing this. Dual timeline, realistic, friends on opposite sides of the divide, people getting reformed, grief, found family. And one thing I don't normally see is the effort that Joy put into the transition between the timelines. So I don't want to spoil it, but I really enjoyed how she did that. So a little extra credit. So that's my historical fiction. Yay! The heater is also out. I broke out the heater and yesterday I turned it on. So we got the wool sweater, we got the heater, and oh, what's this? That's right. It's a Kamala t-shirt. Yay. So just a reminder to make a plan to vote. If you're early voting, if you've already done it, great job. If you haven't, what are you doing with your life in the US? Okay. Let's see. Oh, Cat Paw says, wasn't an Aussie accent, just typing at an awkward angle. Gotcha. And then Jim coming in and Leslie saying A Tangled Mercy. Love that title. Yeah, she's got good titles. Titles are hard, so I like that. The next book, number 3. Oh, this is an overlay. And I made a new friend on TikTok. And I told him I would be talking about this book. So hopefully he finds his way here. This one. So this book is called Slow Down, and I got it from the library, and I had to return it. So I don't have the copy in front of me, but I did take pictures of the pages where I had notes and Post-its, and I put those into my Storygraph. So this is a book called Slow Down, The Degrowth Manifesto by Kohei Saito. This is a Japanese economist, quite young for, I don't know, economists I always picture as old dudes. But you'll see why when I talk about his main points. So I really enjoyed this book. One of the other books that I read that was by sort of radical socialist climate community folks was called Half Earth Socialism. And it was really not well put together for an audience to absorb. So like with that, it's my last try. I read this one because I don't remember where I picked it up, but got it from the library. And it was just much better thought out. So if you're looking for something to understand, like what are the alternatives to what we have now, this is an economist who looked into Marx and his like deep dive into how Marx evolved. So like Marx published Capital and he had a plan for second and third volumes, but he never published them. He had extensive notes and I think it was like 10 years, but he never published them. And Saito explains that in his view, this is because his theories were still evolving and he had changed a lot of his conclusions at the end of his life. And so he was reworking that with the people he was talking to, the letters he was writing, and all this kind of stuff. So we get a lot of like 19th century research, which is pretty cool, but also a lot of quotes from other economists who are talking about these types of things in relation to how do we stop the rampant capitalism from ruining the planet and making it unlivable for humans. Because don't clown. The earth will go on. It's humans that will not be able to survive this situation we've created. So notes on this book. So at the beginning, I really liked some of the models he set up. So he talks about the donut economics. So this is from someone called Raworth. And donut economics is the idea, picture, okay, you know, we usually have graphs and we have lines and like bars and whatever. The donut economic model talks about planetary resilience. And so picture a circle and picture us in the middle with like the earth. And then think about like if you go all the way around and you have different words on each thing, like a Trivial Pursuit pie chart or something, right? And on each of those things, we have climate change, biodiversity loss, biochemical flow of nitrogen and phosphorus, land system changes, freshwater use, ocean acidification, ozone layer depletion, atmospheric aerosol loading, and pollution by chemical substances. So there are 9 sectors of planetary resilience. And it's sort of like when you go out, you have an outer limit that the planet will start like collapsing if you go past it, but it's different for each sector, if that makes sense. And so I just thought that was a really helpful model to visualize. And yeah, so that's what's wrong. That's where we're headed and where we need to like pull back. Excuse me. So Saito also talks about people proposing to develop the world. And full disclosure, this is the field I went into. I went to grad school for development economics. The reason I learned all those stupid formulas was because I wanted to be able to analyze and help countries who are less developed develop so that their standard of living would increase and they could enjoy more freedoms and less terrifying things like drought, starvation, floods, all these things, and work in the policy realm to make those things happen. Okay, hold on. This is not going away. Spoiler alert, I became a historical fiction writer instead. But Saito makes the point that for people who think still that we can follow the developed countries model, like the US, and export it to less developed countries so that they develop along the same timeline, which is a problematic view, that it's not going to work. Because if you look at that donut, like if you take the US standard of living and consumption of carbon and energy and give it to everyone in the US, like we're blowing out the budget, right? There's no room for that much carbon in the budget. Fail. So good point. Supports his point. No problem with that. And then he gets into the community stuff. And part of what I studied with development economics was civil society. So international development looks at not only what you invest in and where the money goes, but also how you distribute it and what you do with the money. So how do you invest? And do you give it to strengthen civil society, like nonprofit sector and education, all these things that aren't just businesses. So one of his main points is that community building and this sort of grassroots activity, as in a real civil society, is social security born of free association. And I liked that phrase for one of his subtitles. Social security we think of as a government program, but it was born of free association. So the idea for Social Security came out of the fact that people were stashing money away with their community post office, or having one person collect things at the trade union office and store it away for people, or having a group that everyone had a chance to take something out of the kitty that they fed into each time. Those are all community ideas that then turned into the welfare state in Europe's case. And this is a quote, or the point that talks about it is a quote from someone named Graeber, who I don't know. But I liked that it was like, oh yeah, welfare state. It's not like socialists came in and ordered everyone around and knew what to do. It was that they took ideas from the civil society and were like, oh, okay, the state can do that. We can help with these. We can help with that. We can make this part of our duty, our job. So I like that. Let's see. There was a part where I was a bit confused because, and someone will definitely be able to help me out with this. When I was reading in grad school, I remember picking up Orientalism by Edward Said, who is a Palestinian author about post-colonial topics and subjects and lenses. And I remember I got the book. I still have it. That's at least 10 years old on the shelf. And I got it, but I haven't read it yet. And I remember hearing something a little bit later about like how he was problematic himself. And I don't remember, it was a long time ago, but that's what's made me sort of hesitant, kind of like Cosmopolitanism. That's another book with a similar title that I have the same association with. And I'm like, why is that valid? Someone who knows more about this stuff, please weigh in on that. So in Slow Down, Saito is talking about Orientalism and Marx and the fact that Marx had a very Europe-centric view, and that was part of the problem. He didn't see how his model depended on like the periphery being the rest of the world, and if you didn't just look at Europe, it changed the sort of theory. So I liked that. I appreciated it. It made sense to me. But now I'm kind of thinking about, well, what is this Orientalism thing? I guess I need to go read the book, right? He also brings in modern examples. So if you heard about the French climate protests and the Gilets jaunes, which are the people in the yellow vests who are protesting, and Macron's response to that, he had a big climate assembly, and then he had lots of citizens' assemblies, and then they elected people to get together and craft plans and recommendations for climate action. And they did this with representatives by a lottery system. So it was an election, there wasn't money, it was actually like everyone is in this in the system. And I would love to learn more about that because that is very intriguing to me. Because I think a lot of people opt out of political action because it seems too specialized and too hard and too cynical. Like if you watch The West Wing and everyone's flinging terms here left and right, and you have to know the history of this and the backstory of that and the context of everyone, you may feel like, well, you can't make a decision because it'll just be a wrong one. So like you can't wade in at all. But if you have people working together that are at all different places, it sort of levels the playing field. Obviously, you've got different levels of skill, but then like hopefully if you're involved in this endeavor, you have the goodwill to like pool your knowledge and wisdom. And so I think that's a very promising example. So I want to learn more about that. And so in the same way that political action has become very hard for people to get into, one of the main points of the book is that it's a quote from Braverman that I'm going to highlight here. The subsumption of all of society by capital, like capital eating our civil society, has resulted in a fundamental separation of conception from execution. And by that, it's like saying we can think of things, we can't execute them by ourselves. And this is like so me. This is me when I realize in a natural disaster, what would I do? I have no freaking clue. Like I am so screwed, right? If I can't get in the car, if I can't use the gasoline, if I can't drive across a bridge, like the survival instincts in this one, not strong. So not just that, but also just like production and self-sufficiency, not there because we've separated conception from execution, mental from physical labor, and all of that has to change if we want to like survive and change the society, which I really liked. One of the ways we got here I thought was interesting that I had just heard somewhere else actually, but I'm going to use this as my quote is and I don't know if this is a conspiracy theory. It's one of those things you look back and you're like, oh, obviously this is why they did it. And then in the moment you're kind of like, but how would everyone know to do that? So when you think of self-sufficient 18th century Britain, you think people had little windmills and, water wheels. And that's how they got more labor out of their own labor. They used renewable resources. These were decentralized. Why isn't it? Oh, it's not letting me edit. These were decentralized and people were self-sufficient and you couldn't move the rivers and streams because the wheels and the water and the wind was where it was, right? But when you get into oil and coal, you hack those out of the earth. Yes, you have to be out where they are, wherever the resource is. But then you transport it to cities so that all the energy is consumed in a central place. And then then people are away from where they can take care of themselves. They're in a different environment, and unless they're unionized, which came later, they're sort of held captive. So the position of the management, if you will, was pretty shit out in the countryside. They couldn't compel anyone with a water wheel or a windmill to do their bidding. But as soon as we moved into like higher energy outputs, coal and oil, and that became how people got things done because it was faster, then they had to come to the city because that's where all the stuff was trucked in and sold and used. And I thought, wow, that's a really interesting theory. I wonder, he didn't go into it in detail, but I wonder about that. Let's see. We've got thinking. Okay, here's one of the cool lens things. Thinking about the difference between use value and value. So in America, we're very used to thinking about value, right? I mean, what comes to mind when you hear the word value? And I'll wait for this one before I go into the difference, because Americans are so conditioned on this. I want to hear some differences of opinion. Visit the chat to say hello for a second. Cat Paw says, it was a really interesting and informative installment of Good Fight Fridays. Go watch it with joy. Thank you, Cat Paw. JD is dropping in to say a quick hola. Nice. Braid game is 100%. Thank you. This is unwashed hair. It goes in a braid. We've got a Diane here to say hello. Welcome, welcome. Oh, okay. So when you hear value, Leslie says she thinks of capitalism. Interesting. I wonder if you like in the advanced class and you know what's coming. Okay. So I'll give you a second to think about this in your own home. But the difference between value and use value is value has sort of become what we think of it in the capitalist society, which is the amount of money that is assigned to it in a marketplace, right? But that's not the actual like language definition of value, like values inside kind of thing, or what have you. There's lots of different definitions. So if I think of use value, now I know that that is a more particular way to say what use is a thing, right? Like these are expensive, these Yeti things, right? So the value is pretty high, but that's because there's one company that makes them and it controls the price. What's the use value? Well, the use value is also pretty good because I can transport liquids. I can keep the temperature cold or keep the temperature hot. It can fall, as it has done many times, and not break because it's very durable. So to me, the use value of that is pretty good. Probably not as high as like, well, it's not a dollar amount, right? You could measure it in terms of like labor units. So we're not going to get into barter economy or anything of that, but like separating the idea that one company's determination is law when it comes to value, and how you think of an object yourself and how much use it has to you as a member of society. So just like think about that for a second and try to unlearn the whole capitalist lens. It's an interesting exercise. And when you go through the book, they have a lot of reinforcing of that, which is nice. So JD thinks of you get what you pay for. I think of quality or worth, value, like investment. Yeah. It's very interesting the way that the last 150 years of economic activity has colored the language so much, and the words mean very different things. Anita says, yeah, value equals quality and purpose for me. So like more of an internal thing. Interesting. Yeah. So value and use value. What else do we have that I wanted to highlight? Here's like the bearing out of that idea. Good and Bad Freedom is the subtitle. The quote is, we must distinguish freedom, the American-style capitalist value system, by which liberty is measured by the realization of a lifestyle that places the largest possible burden on the environment. From Actual Freedom, I think is the end of the quote. And that hit me like, yes, that's exactly what I have a problem with. People saying, well, I want the freedom to stretch out. I want the freedom to, take up 3 carbon footprints. I want the freedom to pollute. I want the freedom to make as much profit as I want. Like, why isn't that my right? And that entitlement is just, no, that's not freedom. So I liked that distinction. social movements allow us to transcend the imperial mode of living. That stretching out in that way is what he calls the imperial mode of living. And while some of the Brits in the chat might not like that language, it's pretty apt. So yeah, I think of there's a lot wrapped up in that, and I liked how he explained it when we first came across that term. Let's see. He talks about social movements. He talks about like what he actually thought Marx's late evolution of his theories were, even though he didn't publish them. And then there's like a couple pieces at the end I really thought were interesting about bullshit jobs and like essential work. And yeah, I got a lot out of this book, and hopefully Mr. Buzz from TikTok will be able to watch this and we can have like a little dialogue. Maybe he'd even like to come on the channel. That'd be fun. Because who else am I going to talk to about this economics nerdery? So yeah, so that was my fantastic review for Slow Down, the Degrowth Manifesto. And it's called Degrowth because, you know, people are always talking about the growth of the economy. You want to see the line going up, or I gosh, going up backwards. That's not going to work with the climate crisis. So this is the attempt at describing how the world could look, how we could approach doing things differently, like now, like right now. So important book, important timing. Please go get this, listen to it, read it, whatever you can, because I think it's really important. And it's way better than half-earth socialism presented itself. So hi, Eloise. Nice to see you. So let me take that down. What's next? Rosie's Traveling Tea Shop. This one I have the actual copy for. And you'll note that it's a special British version that I found in a used bookstore. So there's 2 L's in traveling. Did you know that? Did you know that difference? So this is by Rebecca Raisin. It's got the cutest cover. It's a little pink camper van that's converted into a little pop-up food shop with cakes and tea. And this was very enjoyable. I liked it a lot. It's an author I have not read before. I was a little confused because there's a book series that is about a character named Agatha Raisin, and this is by an author named Rebecca Raisin. And I was like, are they the same? They're not. They're not. This is much better. This is contemporary romance that's got like a little bit of depth to it. So it's just my kind of romance. I liked it a lot. And I will say my 4-star review, it stands out because while much of it is fantasy, I mean, you in a drunken fit of stupor order this van when your life is going down the tubes and set off on an adventure, which is kind of silly to like do without planning. So there's a fantasy part to it, but the emotions are real and it tackles a very real modern gut punch. So that is catfishing on dating apps. So I know it was actually a Hallmark movie a couple years ago, maybe, but they treat that in here. And just like I appreciated Witch of Wild Things bringing in AOL chat rooms, I appreciate this book bringing in the sort of complicated modern phenomenon of being on a dating app and having your hopes sort of dashed when people act like creeps or like just jerks, right? So I liked that because I don't think I've seen it ever before except in that Hallmark movie. So new author, well written, very cute, very cozy, lots of food talk about the cakes and whatnot. She makes blends her own tea blends. So that was kind of cool. She goes to Hay on Wye. She goes to a bunch of other fun spots around the UK, which is cute. I liked like living through that and pretending I was there. And the love interest is pretty dreamy. And I won't spoil anymore because it's a great read and you should definitely pick it up. It's probably easy to pick up on an ebook or in the library because it's only a few years old. I think 2019. So Rosie's Traveling Tea Shop. If you need a cozy, soft place to land on, that is a good one. The camper van is so cute. It's bright pink. That's part of its allure. Are they related to the California raisins? No, I don't believe they are, JD. I can't do the Gilligan's Island. I was trying to do like the Upper East Side or Long Island or whatever that accent is. Mr. something with an H. I can't remember. You know what I'm trying to do. JD says, catfishing is wild, and I've heard so many horror stories from dating apps, but also heard good stories. I know, that's why you still have the hope, but the lessons I've heard is that if someone feels off, don't waste your time. Yeah, block. No, that's not it. It's something with an H, though, I think. Howl, Mr. Howl, the Howls on Gilligan Island. Got it. Okay. So yeah, recommend that one. So we've got 3 more books. The next one I have is my Victober read, the first one, and it's the 22nd, so I have a chance at reading another book for Victober, but it's also still publishing a book, so we'll see. That's going to be the priority. But this is the one I did get through. It's an American classic, and what's cool about this is that it like crossed wires with another book that I just read, which is Master, Slave, Husband, Wife. So that book was a nonfiction portrayal of this couple that put on disguises and escaped from the South in the 1850s. And they escaped to Boston successfully and met up with the author of this book, so William Wells Brown. He's written several books, and they sort of seem to be like remixes of each other because of the way publishing worked. But this is Clotel, or The President's Daughter. And basically, I think he chose his character as being the granddaughter of Thomas Jefferson because it would catch the eye of the white reading public, because he wrote this before the Civil War, before there was... before abolition was a thing, I'll say. And so he was writing really as like advocacy and trying to show people the humanity of Black people and the stupidity of the system and the nonsense of discriminating based on color or heritage. And so that is all very laudable. The story is sort of a strange mishmash. I liked the master, slave, husband, wife portrayal. Obviously, it's a modern author, so their presentation is going to be more what I'm used to. This is a fictional portrayal of, so the daughter of Thomas Jefferson, and we don't ever see Thomas Jefferson. He's like explained away in a couple paragraphs, and her daughters, and their sort of how it branches out from them. And what can I say about this? It's not really a Victober book because it's not in the land of Victoria's reign, but you know, I think we'll be allowed to get under the wire with this. So he has a part in here where like he really rips down the curtain and explains this whole thing, and like, you know, sort of a melodramatic escape and tension and everything. And then at the end of the paragraph, page 119, this, reader, is no fiction. If you think so, look over the files of the New Orleans newspapers of the years 1845 to 6, and you will see their reports of the trial. So William Wells Brown seems to be fictionalizing actual events and then ripping the curtain down and saying, and this is real, so go check it out. And I'm kind of like, well, that's weird. This is a format thing. Again, not a modern writer, so that's probably part of the gulf. One of the questions that came up when I was writing my current book about to come out on November 30th was the reform movement and the Chartism movement. There were people within it, because it was right alongside the abolition movement. There were people who were comparing the fate, or the plight, I should say, of the English laborer, which was pretty terrible, with the plight of the American slave, and using it as like a political play, as you can imagine, like who has it worse and which system is better and blah, blah, blah. Very cynically used, I should say. But I have someone who thinks that and then changes his mind in my book, and I thought that was an interesting point to bring up. And here's the Williams Wells Brown quote about it. The English laborer may be oppressed. He may be cheated, defrauded, swindled, and even starved, but it is not slavery under which he groans. he cannot be sold. In point of law, he is equal to the prime minister. It is easy to captivate the unthinking and the prejudiced by eloquent declamation about the oppression of English operatives being worse than that of American slaves, because that's what slave arguers or apologists were trying to argue. And by exaggerating the wrongs on one side and hiding them on the other, but all informed and reflecting minds, knowing that bad as are the social evils of England, and Marx and Engels would be able to tell you, those of slavery are immeasurably worse. So yeah, he brings in things that are like real politic of the time. And so that's why it's a little weird to read it, because it's very much like almost like newspapers, but then there's the melodrama and then like the chivalry, and it's just sort of a weird register to be in. So, I mean, I'm glad I read it. It wasn't enchanting. It was engrossing in parts, but that was come and go. So, there's a part where it says, when you ask, well, let me just read it. It's the next page. So basically the modern argument is like, we don't have racism anymore. It's post-racism because we're all equal and equal protection under the law, whatever. And then people are like, but we still have racism, because you wouldn't want to exchange your place with a black person as a white person, would you? And there was that experiment in the 50s or 60s with the sociologist who asked that to the class. And it was very obvious that kids even were being acculturated to know that like a black person's place was less likely to succeed or had more burdens and all these things. So it's like, no, we still have a system that has that built in that we're working against. So to say it doesn't exist anymore is pretty stupid. And saying you don't see race is one of those ways that we say that. And back in 1850s, everybody knows that slavery in its best and mildest form is wrong. Whoever denies this, his lips libel his heart. Try him. Clank the chains in his ears and tell him they are for him. Give him an hour to prepare his wife and children for a life of slavery. Bid him make haste and get ready their necks for the yoke and their wrists for the coffle chains. Then look at his pale lips and trembling knees, and you have nature's testimony against slavery. So if people like admit deep down that they're scared of being in a certain situation, they cannot in the other side of their mouth say that that situation doesn't exist and like it's just that person's fault. So that's kind of the parallel that I'm drawing. And I thought it was interesting that I found it in the book. There are some funny anecdotes just here and there. Again, a format thing, like he has someone who's reformed and like on the abolitionist side giving a speech. And he talks about despots throughout history and despotism and how slavery is that type of government. And that's like, meh, it's not really, I don't like listening to speeches. So when you go on and on, it's like a preaching thing, not my thing. And then there's also sort of like the example of what people are hoping for, which is like, two slaves escaped, but then they were separated and one went on with their life and thought they had lost the other, and same with the other person, and then they eventually found each other. So I feel like that sort of melodrama was supposed to give hope to the people reading this in terms of like the deserving actually getting success or getting what they deserve, which is like 0% of the cases in this time. So it's sad, but interesting as a piece of history, and he's an interesting person. I don't know, when I read the other book by Il-Yan Wu, it gave me a sort of like skeptical view of this author and how he was sort of playing the field in more ways than one. So having read his book, I'm like, okay, he wasn't that great of a said he was a great storyteller in the other book, but reading it now, I'm kind of like, okay, I remain unconvinced of his storytelling capacities, but that's fine. Times change. Okay, two more. let's see. I'm going to catch up with some of the Victober talk. Oh, okay. Howl. H. Thank you. You're telling me to pronounce the capital letter differently, how Brits pronounce H. I'm dropping my H's. Jim says, my Victober reading hasn't been a great success so far. I DNF'd Oscar Wilde and just up to page 64 of Barnaby Rudge. Well, good luck, Jim. JD says, to make it a Victober book, read while munching on Victoria sandwiches. I don't know what a Victoria sandwich is. That's a cookie, right? A Victoria cake? I don't know if it's a cookie. I don't know if you can munch on a cake. It's not crisp enough. Which Wilde book did you DNF? Picture of Dorian Gray. Yeah, not a play. The plays are separate in the prompts for this year, JD. So that's probably what Jim is thinking. He did have some plays. I didn't finish Dorian Gray either because I was reading on Serial Reader and that format wasn't cooperating. Yeah. Clash with Dickens, a readathon of which started on 13th of October. Didn't want to read 2 Victorian novels simultaneously. I hear you. That's a solid plan. I didn't want to do that either. So I should probably start on the next one because this one's finished now. Oh, Cat Paw says I finished The Odd Women. I can see how it was before its time, but it's from its time. Isn't that great? But after I really felt the need to read something modern sci-fi before picking up Tale of Two Cities. Yeah, gotcha. Interesting. Before its time. Does that mean you liked it or didn't like it? I don't know. Yeah, let's say. Gotcha. I'm enjoying iRobot and pushing through a book on Egyptian mythology. Copy paste much? The mythology one? Is it like Wikipedia? Jim liked The Odd Women. He read that in 2020, and that's the reason I have it on my shelf. So read along. Oh, yeah, the read along for the readathon. I gotcha. It's a cute opinion. Racism is alive and well. Different, maybe, but alive for sure. In the penal system, African Americans and Native Americans are more likely to be incarcerated for the same crimes as white Caucasian Americans. Yes. And part, I was talking about the Indian card earlier. Part of the stuff that she goes into is actually, no, that's from the podcast, but going over jurisdiction and the Supreme Court cases and like how tribal sovereignty is trying to be torn away. It's pretty diabolical. Yeah. JD says, Black and Hispanic people will get higher interest rates on loans and have a lower percentage of approval. But yeah, no racism. No, none at all. Cat Paw says, I DNF Dorian Gray too. Wow, we have a DNF Dorian Gray club here. Cat Paw also DNF'd Trilby by George du Maurier. Is George du Maurier related to Daphne du Maurier? I have to ask. Victoria's sandwich is a sponge cake. 2 sponges, Jennifer's filling. Okay. Is sponge cake. All right, and the raspberry in between. That's what I was picturing. Munch, munch, munch. The mythology is copy-paste. Feels like they took raw docs and dumped in a book, barely formatting. Oh, disappointing. You can DNF it, it's okay. It's okay. All right, so moving on from Victober with Clotel, I've got 2 very modern reads. So we go from 1853 with Clotel, and now we zoom up to the present. So the last physical book I have is my last, come back tab, my last Patreon book club book. So this is The Order of the Pure Moon Reflected in Water by Zen Cho, and it has a really pretty cover. So you could see, you have to look at it for a while, or at least I did. It looked just like watercolor and flowers, but there's actually figures on there. So I got this book because I'd seen it on Booktube and it had been recommended to me. And I found it used, and it's a hardcover, but slim volume. So it was not something I was going to purchase new. But I found a good deal on it. And so this is our last Patreon book club pick. So I opted out of doing December. So we're going to be 4 years minus a month of doing this every other month. And just a little bit of celebration. I took a little bit of time. It did take a little bit of time to do this morning. That's not going to do anything. Where's the overlay? There we go. 23 books. These are all the books we read, and larger or smaller based on what my taste dictated for the last 4 years, which is pretty awesome. So, yeah, like I just think that's a pretty cool accomplishment, and just wanted to celebrate it for a moment and say, wow, I got people to vote on these, and I read some stuff that was like out of my comfort zone, and I was glad I tried out these books, and some of the authors I really loved, some of the authors I've had on my channel, and a good handful of them not gonna revisit. But it's good to try things, like I said, outside of your comfort zone. So yeah, I just thought I'd do a little graphic to celebrate and say, yay, we'll be bringing something out as a different Patreon benefit, but like the book club is over, and we'll be transforming the Patreon site probably in the new year after the new book is out. So as our last book, we had this short one. It is a wuxia fantasy. So it's also a queer fantasy. And if you don't know what wuxia is, I Google pronounced it. So this is my best effort at imitating the Google pronunciation. It is a Chinese genre of fiction that is based in the chivalrous tradition of martial arts. So if you think of American style kung fu movies, that's all about the martial arts, whereas wuxia fantasy talks about the chivalry aspect. It's more like historical fantasy based on gallantry, chivalry, those sorts of things, and integrity. So it's sort of a character book, and that didn't stop it from being very action-packed, but also kind of slow. My opinion of this is that it's not really my genre. I don't really understand it because this is the first one I ever read. So I'd have to read another one to sort of see what are the parameters, what am I expecting. I did like the reveals. I did like some of the humor. Some of it went over my head. Some of it was like, didn't understand. There were places where it felt like there were typos, like things I didn't understand because I was like, that word doesn't make sense, or like you didn't explain what that word means in a different language, that kind of thing. So I definitely stumbled on this, but again, it's one of the collection that I'm glad I tried it. And there were some good parts for sure, and there's definitely connection between the characters, and some fun moments of like bandit humor and that sort of thing. And the first line is really fun. First line: there was a brief lull in the general chatter when the bandit walked into the coffee house. So if you're looking for something short and way out of left field in terms of historical fantasy, then get you a religious order based quest story. So I think it's a standalone, and Zencho just came out with a new book, but like not related. So I think they're doing pretty well. And yeah, nice note to end on. Oh, okay. So here are people telling me. I asked people to tell me about Edward Said and Orientalism, and no one has volunteered anything, but I'm getting some some notes on wuxia fantasy. Let me catch up here. This is about the mythology book. All right. George is Daphne's grandfather. Okay. Victober. That makes sense. Very cool. The cover. The cover is Chef's Kiss. I love it. Damn, that's nice. Yes. Cover keyboard. What are you up to? Yeah, I gotcha. Pour one out for the book club. Yep. Jim says, I've read Night Circus, and Once There Were Wolves from those. Yeah. I mean, you probably influenced my putting some of those books on the list. So there you go. Wuxia fantasy, superhero kung fu, basically. But like extra. So wuxia fantasy also has a lot of, I won't say K-drama because it's a Chinese genre. It's definitely like a Chinese cultural tradition. But there are Chinese dramas. Maybe I should ask Esther about this. She will probably know. But like court intrigues and maybe chosen one, maybe not. I don't know. I'll have to ask her about it. Oh, wuxia comics from Hong Kong. Very cool. If you can find Chinese hero at a library, one of the more famous ones. Okay, cool. Recommendation. Anita says, I believe Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon falls in the wuxia character or close to it. I can see that for sure. It's the gracefulness. I think that's like one of the requirements in terms of aesthetic and like feel. Yeah, it should, says JD to Anita. So yeah, that is the last one for that. And then my last one needs an overlay, which is last. This one. Yay. So this is the last book I finished called The Haunting of Hecate Cavendish. And it's by Paula Braxton. And you know what? You know what really bugs me is that see if you can find something that is a problem on this cover. Take a look. See if you can tell me what I should have seen before and been wary of. I mean, we love Libro.fm. We love that we got an advanced listening copy of this. But anybody see it? My voice is getting hoarse again. So before we finish up. Nobody? Use value. Let's see, make sure I didn't forget anything else. Gracefulness and tragedy. Yeah. That's a good summation, actually. No, not the narrator. It's this thing at this level. Part one. So this was like 16 hours to listen to. And yeah, it doesn't finish. Like there's no resolution. I mean, there's sort of resolution, but I was expecting it to end, and it does not end. There's no like solving of the mystery and the crime. And so I got suckered in. Yeah, not the narrator. It's not pink hair. What is that at the top? I don't know. It might be a scarf. I don't know. Yeah, so it leaves that off on a cliffhanger. And what do I yeah. Okay, so I will say it really had me entertained while I was listening to it. It came out, I think, a couple months ago, August, and I was really into it. I loved the details. I loved the main character. She's about 22 and just starts a new job as an assistant librarian in Hereford Cathedral. I haven't read this author before. And she discovers she has an ability that's supernatural. She sees ghosts, right? Her name is Hecate, which is sort of a spoiler, which is fine, which is good. And she has various people she meets and people that she suspects and people that help her. And, she develops a theory and learns more as she goes, which is great. She's also got like mortal friends and, there's like the police involved and like something happens, right? The first thing that happens after she sees ghosts is that someone breaks out of the crypt and like, did they break into the crypt or did they break out of the crypt is the first mystery. And then it sort of like piles on. And there's a lot of cool magical world elements, like the stuff in the library she finds, the ghosts she meets, their histories, like how she was named and like what powers she has and how she gets them. Those are only like very small developed, very mildly developed, I guess. But like, and there's a love story, but I can't spoil the love story. It's not the resolution. I'll just say that. And yeah, so that was sort of disappointing. When you look at the book that is the regular cover, the rectangle paperback or ebook cover, it does not say part one. So that would have made me even more mad. So I was just like, I kept listening and going, how is this going to wrap up? How is this going to wrap up? 3 hours, 1 hour, 18 minutes. And I'm like, this can't wrap up in 18 minutes. So, and now I have to wait, I don't know how long to like get back into the world, which is sad. It's got a really pretty cover and it's got a great story, but now I'm going to forget like all the cool details before I get to listen to the next one. So that's a bit of a bummer, but not a fault of the writing. I will say the narrator, usually I listen to a book on 1.1 or 1.2 because people space out stuff and I can listen a bit faster to make like get through it faster. But this person, she's an actress. She's a British actress, Marisa Cullen. She speeds up her words with an English accent so that there's no space in the center and then slows down for dramatic effect, but then ramps up when you need. And I'm like, I can't speed this up. This is kind of irritating. So I had to listen to it at 1.0 speed, which I mean is normal life, but it's just one of those things. She did have places where that made it hard to understand. I probably had like 4 or 5 places where I wrote down what I thought it said, but I couldn't tell. And maybe I'll ask someone else if they can hear it, but I couldn't tell what was being said because of the way she talked and like the texture she gave it, which was a little frustrating. But for the most part, I really liked it. Catpaw says, listen to one of those. Miffed, I went on to book 2, wanting some resolution, which was totally different, violent, and I did not finish it. See, whenever anyone asks me for like a book I hated or the lowest rated book ever, I give the Connie Willis book Blackout because it ended on a real cliffhanger and I wasn't expecting it. And it wasn't billed as a series. Maybe I read like an early version or something. Anyway, it made me mad. So yeah, as an author, do I think about this when I'm writing the book? And yeah, because when I'm writing it, I want it to have an arc and end. And obviously, these types of writers write a series in their head before they write one book and finish it off. And they think, oh, well, I know where this is going. And for me, who is a pantser, I'm like, no, I don't. I need to have it, wrapped up. This book that I'm publishing next month, there are threads that I have plans to, weave into something for the second and third books, but I haven't written them yet. So I needed to make sure everything made sense at the end of this book. There's no cliffhanger stuff. Like that is a no. That is a no-go in my world. Jim says, I like books that can stand alone. That's why I have problems with a fantasy like Black Sun. Oh, thank you for letting me know. I didn't know that was the cliffhanger too. I do want to read Rebecca Roanhorse and A Little Hatred by Joe Abercrombie. I was told to try Joe Abercrombie. I think a different one, different series. But thank you for letting me know those because I better have the other one right next to it if I'm going to start. JD says, even writing a series, I need to have a good ending for every book. Not a fan of that. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a cliffhanger exactly, but like she doesn't stop the main conflict. So it didn't feel satisfying. And that's what one of the reviewers said when I looked it up too on Storygraph. So there we go. There's our sad little ending for our 7 books today. I hope you have a better ending for your reading today. I was going to do, I know it's after the hour, but I will do a quick thing about the 2 books I'm currently reading because they're very, very different. And I think it's kind of funny. So The Truth According to Ember by Danica Nava is an Indigenous romance set in a workplace, and I'm loving it. I am almost done. It just got past the steamy part, or one steamy part. I don't know. And the other one has even prompted me to put out TikTok videos. I got 3, I think. It's called The Empire of Letters. I might have mentioned it before. It's a interlibrary loan, so I can't take this off. But it's about how people write letters and what the social mores were around letters in the 17th, 18th to beginning of the 19th century. I was getting this for background research for my book, and I didn't really need to read all of it, but like it's fascinating. So I keep coming across these silly little facts and I'm like, That's so interesting. And then I make a TikTok because I'm like, what? Have you guys ever heard this? And so if you follow me on TikTok, you'll find out what's been fascinating me in the past couple days and distracting me from publishing my book. We're in good stead. I sent out the paperback details. I'm hoping to get the paperback cover. And once again, if you want to be the first to see the cover reveal, sign up on Patreon. You don't have to pay anything. You just follow for free, and I will let you guys see the cover first. And it's coming soon. I think I'll have a few posts this week and next week, and then drop it next Friday. We'll see. I think that's the plan. But yeah, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, guys. It's getting down to the brass tacks. It's so good, Leslie. Like, she's funny. She's funny. I'm really enjoying it. And he's dreamy. We'll see what happens when the shit hits the fan, but so far I'm loving it. Oh boy. Okay, well, that is me today. Come back on Friday. I will have a productivity stream at 9:30 Pacific if you want to join. And then I will have my lovely guest, Leonor Solis, who will come on. She is a contemporary romance writer who highlights Latin heroines, plus-size heroines, and social justice causes. So she's going to be on for Good Fight Friday. I'm super excited she's coming. And that is the link if you want to put a notification on your YouTube. I wouldn't say no. But yeah, 5 p.m. Pacific. So Friday, I've got 2 live streams. Hope to see you at one or both. And away we go. I hope you have a lovely rest of the week. Happy Wednesday. Don't forget to vote and make a plan. And I'll see you again soon. Take care.